They thought the mission was over. The radio was silent. The river had swallowed her whole. A seal whispered the words no soldier ever wants to say, "We're done." But the water moved. A shadow rose. And in that moment, fear turned into shock. She wasn't dead. She wasn't finished. Bleeding. Exhausted. Still gripping her weapon. The female sniper emerged from the river, alive. What happened next stunned the entire unit. This is not just a war story. This is a story of survival, courage, and the moment everyone thought was impossible. Stay till the end, because this ending changes everything. The operation began long before sunrise, when the jungle was still wrapped in darkness. Moist air clung to their skin, and every sound felt amplified. Dripping water, distant insects, the crunch of boots on wet soil. This was enemy territory, miles away from any backup. The Navy SEAL team moved slowly, communicating only through hand signals. Years of training had taught them one rule above all else: silence keeps you alive. Above them, unseen but always watching, was their sniper, the team's guardian angel. She lay motionless, eyes locked through her scope, controlling the battlefield before the first shot was ever fired. She wasn't just another soldier. She was the best shot the unit had ever produced. Calm under pressure, precise in chaos, and mentally stronger than most men beside her. She had survived selections others quit within days. She had proven herself again and again, until doubts disappeared and respect replaced them. Tonight, she carried more than a rifle. She carried the responsibility of every life below her position. From her vantage point, she tracked movement, wind direction, breathing patterns. One mistake could end the mission. 1 second of hesitation could cost lives. Everything changed in seconds. A single flash, then another. Enemy fire erupted from the tree line. Louder, closer, deadlier than intel had promised. The jungle exploded into chaos. Shouts filled the air. Gunfire echoed endlessly. The sniper fired back instantly, dropping targets with machine-like precision. But then, an explosion rocked her position. The ground vanished beneath her. Pain ripped through her body as she lost balance. She fell, rolling down the muddy slope, straight into the roaring river below. The river was merciless. Freezing cold, violent currents dragged her under again and again. Her rifle slipped from her grasp. Blood mixed with water as she fought to breathe. Every instinct screamed to let go, to surrender. But she refused. Using her training, she slowed her breathing, allowed the current to carry her, and disappeared beneath the surface. Above, the SEALs searched desperately. Flashlights cut through darkness. But there was nothing, no movement, no response. Only silence and blood. Minutes felt like hours. Enemy forces were closing in. Extraction time was slipping away. The team leader made the hardest call of his career. His voice cracked as he spoke into the radio. One SEAL whispered the words no soldier ever wants to hear: "We're done." Heads dropped. Eyes burned with rage and grief. They had lost one of their own. A warrior. A sister. The river had claimed her, or so they believed. Then it happened. The water rippled. Slowly. Unnaturally. A hand broke the surface. Then a head. Gasping. Bleeding. Alive. She rose from the river like a ghost. Eyes burning with determination. The SEALs froze in disbelief. No one spoke. No one breathed. Against every odd, she had survived. She locked eyes with the team leader and nodded once. She was still in the fight. Without hesitation, she retrieved a fallen weapon and took position. Despite injuries, despite exhaustion, her hands were steady. She eliminated advancing enemies one by one, buying the team precious seconds. Her survival reignited the unit's fire. Morale surged. The SEALs pushed back harder than ever. The enemy retreated. The impossible had shifted the tide of battle. The extraction was successful. As the helicopter lifted off, the team looked at her with new eyes. Not just a sniper, not just a soldier, a legend. The story spread through the unit, whispered with respect, remembered with awe. She had risen from the river when hope was dead, and from that night on, Her name was never spoken lightly again. Back at the forward base, the noise of war finally faded. Weapons were cleaned, wounds were treated, but no one could forget what they had witnessed. The female sniper sat quietly, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her face pale but calm. Medics moved around her, stunned that she was even breathing. The team gathered nearby, exchanging silent glances. No jokes, no bravado, only respect. That night, no medals were handed out, no speeches were made, but every man there knew they had just seen something rare. Survival when death was certain. Strength when the body was broken. Courage when hope was already buried. In the days that followed, her story became part of training rooms and whispered briefings. Not as motivation, but as a warning, never assume a warrior is finished until they decide it themselves. Weeks later, the mission was officially marked classified. Reports were filed. Footage was locked away. Names were removed from public records. To the outside world, it was just another successful operation. But inside the unit, everything had changed. New recruits heard the story late at night, usually from veterans who spoke quietly and never exaggerated. They didn't talk about tactics or weapons. They talked about willpower, about a moment when logic said, mission over, but the human spirit said otherwise. The female sniper returned to duty after recovery, refusing special treatment, refusing praise. Yet every time she entered a room, conversation stopped, not out of fear, but respect. She had crossed a line few ever do. She had faced death, been claimed by it, and still returned. Long after the jungle grew quiet and the river kept flowing, her story remained, not written in medals, but etched into memory. And in that unit, whenever someone whispered, "We're done," another voice would always answer, "Not yet." Years passed, but the night never faded. The jungle changed. The river kept flowing. Wars came and went. Yet within the unit, that mission lived on, not as a victory report, but as a living reminder. New technology arrived, new tactics replaced old ones, but whenever training became unbearable, instructors would pause and tell a story. Not about weapons, not about strategy, about a sniper who refused to disappear. She never spoke publicly about that night. When asked, she would simply say, "I did my job." But those who were there knew the truth. They remembered the moment hope died, and then stood back up. They remembered how silence felt heavier than gunfire. How a whisper, "We're done," almost became the final chapter. The sniper went on to train others. She taught patience, discipline, and something no manual could explain, controlled defiance. She taught soldiers how to breathe when panic clawed at their chest, how to think when pain demanded surrender. She never called it heroism. She called it responsibility. One evening, during a routine exercise near a river that looked eerily familiar, a young recruit hesitated. The current was strong. Fear was visible in his eyes. The sniper knelt beside him and said quietly, "The river isn't the enemy. Doubt is." The recruit crossed. The lesson stayed. Legends are often imagined as distant, untouchable figures. But this one walked among them, ate with them, corrected their mistakes. And when medals were mentioned, she would change the subject. Because for her, the true reward was simpler, the knowledge that others would live because she once refused to let go. On the anniversary of that mission, the unit gathered privately. No ceremony, no press, just silence. Someone placed a hand on the river's edge. Someone else whispered a prayer. And then, almost instinctively, they looked toward her. She nodded once, the same nod she had given when she rose from the water. Alive, ready. That is how legends truly exist. Not carved into stone, not printed in headlines, but breathing, teaching, standing quietly at the edge of the impossible, reminding everyone that the human spirit has one final weapon, the choice to continue. And whenever darkness falls and someone thinks the fight is over, her story answers softly, yet firmly. Not yet. Time did what it always does. It moved forward without asking permission. New missions replaced old ones. New names filled briefing rooms. The jungle where it all happened slowly reclaimed the scars of war. Trees grew where blood once soaked the soil. The river kept flowing, indifferent to what it had taken and what it had given back. To the world, that night was gone. But inside the unit, time behaved differently. Stories were not told loudly. They never were. They were passed quietly, late at night, when the weight of training pressed hardest on tired minds. When recruits questioned their limits. When pain felt personal and fear felt justified. That was when someone would say, "Let me tell you about the night the river gave someone back." And the room would go silent. The female sniper never asked to become a symbol. She never wanted her name attached to myth. In fact, she actively avoided it. After recovery, she returned to duty like nothing extraordinary had happened. Same discipline, same silence, same refusal to explain herself. But people noticed. They noticed how she trained longer than required. How she stayed after exercises, correcting the smallest mistakes. How she never raised her voice. Yet everyone listened. When she spoke, it was never dramatic. It was precise, measured, heavy with experience. She taught soldiers that fear was not weakness. Panic was. She taught them that pain was inevitable. Surrender was optional. She taught them something few instructors dared to explain. Survival is not about strength. It is about refusal. Years later, during a joint operation briefing, a young officer asked her a question no one else dared to ask. "How did you know you wouldn't die in the river?" The room froze. She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her hands. Scarred. Steady. Then she said, "I didn't." Confusion spread across the room. "I knew I might die," she continued. "I just decided I wouldn't stop trying while it was happening." That sentence followed that officer for the rest of his career. As time passed, her role shifted. She stopped deploying as often. Not because she was weaker, but because she was needed elsewhere. Training grounds, evaluation units, quiet corners of the organization where real influence lived. She shaped doctrine without writing it, changed mindset without announcing it. And then came the mission that reminded everyone why legends are never accidents. A different country, a different river, different soldiers, same silence. Intel failed again. It always does. The team found itself pinned down near fast water, enemy closing in, chaos creeping toward collapse. A young sniper froze. He was good, talented even. But talent doesn't answer fear. Experience does. Over calms, a calm voice cut through the noise. Breathe. Count the current, not the enemy. He recognized the voice instantly. He followed the instruction. He survived. Later, he would say he never saw her that day, only heard her. But that was enough. Because legends don't always appear in front of you. Sometimes they stand just behind you, steadying the ground. Eventually, retirement came. Quietly. No ceremony. No farewell speech. Just a signature, a handshake, and a door closing without echo. On her last day, she walked alone to the edge of a river near the base. Not the same one, but close enough. She watched the water for a long time. Then she turned away, because the story was never about the river. It was about the choice made inside it. And that choice, the refusal to end, lived on. In every soldier who stayed calm when panic demanded collapse. In every whisper that answered, "Not yet." In every moment when someone decided that survival was an act of will, not luck. History never recorded her name. But history doesn't decide what matters. People do. And as long as someone somewhere refuses to surrender while still breathing, her story continues.